So, what's the real difference between someone who gets completely wiped out in a market crash and someone who actually survives it? Well, you might be surprised to hear this, but history actually gives us a blueprint. Let's dive in and see what the past can teach us about navigating the financial storms of today. I want you to imagine hearing this from everyone you work with. During Japan's massive bubble back in the 1980s, one man's father heard it constantly. Literally everyone, his colleagues, his bosses, they were all borrowing money hand over fist, becoming paper millionaires. But see, he was working abroad at the time, so he missed the entire frenzy, and lucky for him, he also missed the catastrophic collapse that buried so many of his peers in a mountain of debt.
You know that feeling that everyone is getting rich? That's a classic, timeless warning sign. It's basically the modern version of that famous story from 1929, where Joseph Kennedy knew it was time to sell when a shoeshine boy started giving him stock tips. Today, it might be that acquaintance who, no matter their background, has suddenly become this die-hard believer in Bitcoin or some other hot new thing. See, the tech changes, the assets change, but our human psychology, that stays exactly the same.
So, okay, this all leads to the big question, right? When the party's over, when the bubble finally bursts and the music stops, who's left standing without a chair? Who are the ones who get wiped out and who are the ones that make it through, maybe even stronger than before? To find the answer, we've got to look at the biggest crash of them all.
All right, so to figure this out, we're going to use the Great Crash of 1929 as our case study. By really dissecting it, we can start to build a clear profile of both the victim and the survivor.
First off, we really need to grasp the sheer scale of this thing. The Great Crash wasn't just some bad day on Wall Street, not by a long shot. It was the spark that lit a decade-long fire of global economic misery that literally reshaped the world. It destroyed wealth, businesses, and lives on a scale that was just unprecedented.
And man, the collapse was like a line of dominoes falling, just brutally fast. It wasn't one single event. The stock market crash caused this huge crisis of confidence. That led to people running to the banks to get their money out. As thousands of banks failed, credit just vanished. Businesses collapsed. Global trade ground to a halt. It was an absolutely vicious downward spiral.
And here's the number that really hits home: 25%. At its absolute peak in 1933, unemployment in the U.S. hit 25%. I mean, just stop and think about that. 1 out of every 4 workers had no job, no income, and in most cases, no safety net. This wasn't just a financial crisis, it was a total societal catastrophe.
Okay, so with that pretty devastating backdrop in mind, let's build out our first profile. Let's talk about the victim. What did the folks who suffered the most have in common?
If you had to boil it down to one single fatal flaw, it was leverage. Back in the 1920s, it was super common for people to buy stocks on margin, putting down maybe 10% and borrowing the rest. This felt amazing on the way up, but on the way down, it was an absolute death sentence, wiping people out completely and leaving them buried in debt they could never repay.
Now, beyond just leverage, there were a few other moves in the victim's playbook. They followed the herd, right? They jumped in late because of classic FOMO, that fear of missing out. They put all their eggs in one basket, pouring all their money into volatile stocks. Many of them also owned assets like real estate, which are illiquid, meaning you can't sell them quickly in a panic. And to top it off, their income usually came from a single job in an industry that got hit hard, like manufacturing, leaving them with absolutely no backup plan.
All right, so now let's flip the coin. Let's look at the contrasting profile. Because while millions were getting ruined, some people actually made it through the storm. So what did their strategy look like? So the survivor's number one most important tool, it was the polar opposite of the victim's fatal flaw. It was all about liquidity. In a world where credit froze up and panic was everywhere, having cash, or things you could turn into cash fast, was the ultimate security blanket. It gave them stability, and more importantly, it gave them options when pretty much everyone else had none.
And really, their whole strategy just flowed from that one core idea. They kept their debt low or had none at all. They held a lot of cash. They didn't just have diversified assets, they also had diversified income streams, where they could, maybe a job in a more stable sector like government or essential services. And crucially, they were disciplined. They resisted that powerful urge to follow the crowd into the bubble. And here's the kicker. Some of them, like the famous oilman J. Paul Getty, used all that cash to buy up incredible assets from people who were desperate to sell, literally for pennies on the dollar. That's how they laid the foundation for massive fortunes.
Okay, so now we've got our two profiles, right? The victim and the survivor.
So let's put them side by side and really boil this all down into a timeless survival blueprint.
And when you look at it this way, it's really a tale of two completely different paths, isn't it? On one side, you've got high leverage, risky and concentrated assets, and a herd behavior fueled by the belief that this time it's different. And on the other side, low or no debt, diversified and liquid assets, and a disciplined, contrarian mindset that understands that when a crisis hits, cash is king.
You know that old saying, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme? Well, it's absolutely true here. The specific stocks, the tech, the assets, that stuff all changes. But the patterns of human behavior, they really don't. The lessons from 1929 are just as powerful for navigating the financial uncertainties we all face today.
So what does this mean for you? What can you actually do? Well, history gives us a pretty simple 3-step defensive blueprint. First, master your leverage. Really understand and control every dollar you owe. Second, prioritize liquidity. Make sure you have a cash cushion that's separate from volatile markets. And third, learn to distrust the crowd. When you hear that can't-lose story being told everywhere you go, that is your signal to be cautious.
And that really brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? The warning signs are always there. They just look a little different. Today's shoeshine boy might be that influencer you follow on social media, or your buddy who just won't shut up about AI stocks or the next big crypto. History has laid out the blueprint for us. It's shown us who survives and who doesn't. So the final and most important question is for you. What is your plan for when the music stops?